I bet you, Karen? All right, don't let me get this on anybody because it is a.
What do you got there? Oh, crop. I love those.
Well, I'll take one.
I like
Thank
the
you.
And if
pepper. The
your
pepper
first
shots.
one doesn't work, I'll give
Have
you
you had
mine.
the
How's
turmeric
that?
pepper shot?
I do, so I do like off and on. Hello. Hi, I'm Bridget. Nice to meet you. So these are going to be, the mics are hot, meaning on as soon as we start the meeting. Usually that's not the whole button, but we have a lot of public comment regarding so feel free to talk
Every student, every day. I love it.
I really think we're moving in the right positive
Feels
direction.
good,
I
doesn't
feel
it?
like more optimistic right now than I have in like, the whole time I've been here.
Nothing matter.
Yeah, no, it's, I really like the focus. I like everyone's been disciplined, and it seems I like everybody next to best.
So what are your
People looking at each other during the workshops kind of makes it, it makes it more collegial, and I feel like we've had a couple of really productive meetings the last few years.
everybody to take their seats? Thank you, Jamal. Jamal,
How are you?
do I need 1 minute?
Nice to meet you.
1 minute?
Patrick Duggan. I'm not one of the school board members. I'm just the lawyer, but I sit at these meetings. So, where do you go to school? Great. Okay. So, do you play any sports or do any club?
Thank you.
We won the championship last year.
Yeah, you guys have a great volleyball.
We'll get started in about 30 seconds, so if everyone can please take their seats, and if everyone has completed their cards. If not, Ms. Tompkins back there will take them.
These chairs are nice.
Good evening. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the school board meeting this Tuesday, September 19th, 2023. The public is encouraged and welcome to address the school board at the hearing of citizens. The board clerk, as mentioned, Kathy Tompkins, seated at the back, will be collecting the cards for hearing of citizens, and once we begin the hearing of citizens, no more cards will be collected. At that time, I will call you forward. Today's student representative is Kyla Fredolina. Even though I practiced it, I probably still messed it up. And will lead us in the pledge. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you Venice High School, JROTC, and thank you, Mr. Troxel, for your support. As mentioned, Kyla Fredolino, did I get it right?
Yeah.
All right, is our student representative for Venice High School. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi. So I play a few sports. I play track and field, soccer, and volleyball here at Venice High School. I'm a junior. Last year we were state championships, which is pretty exciting. I'm also in a few clubs, Science National Honor Society and Math National Honor Society, as well as FLBA Treasurer, which is pretty cool. I'm also honored to be on the principal's cabinet, and I'm very honored to be here at Venice High School. And I was given so many great opportunities at this school, and I'm just so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. As I normally give this beforehand, but I was too busy talking, so my apologies. But we have a certificate of appreciation, and we wish you the best of luck. So I'm going to walk over and bring this over to you. Sorry, I'm going to do
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you again. Before we move forward, shifting gears a little bit more into serious nature, a former colleague of mine and long-term serving a public servant on the Sarasota County School Board, Caroline Zucker, unfortunately lost her husband recently. And I'd like to ask that you all join me in a moment of silence for Mike Zucker. Thank you. We pray for their family and for her comfort, and then again, thank her for her service. Moving on to the next item is the superintendent's report. Mr. Connor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is wonderful to get to celebrate some of the achievements that are occurring around our county and Sarasota public schools. I want to first recognize that we are excited to announce that we have 29 students who have been named semifinalists for National Merit Scholarship Competition. That is a tremendous accomplishment. Let's give all of those students a round of applause. Again, Booker Middle, we recently recognized them earlier this year, but again, they are announced as a Microsoft Showcase School, and we're excited to announce that. That is a great accomplishment. There's a lot that goes into that, so let's give Booker Middle School a round of applause for becoming a Microsoft Showcase School. Just a few updates. It is, as of September 15th, last Friday, the beginning of Florida Spanish Heritage Month. And so we celebrate that from September 15th to October 15th, and we have a short little video to share with you.
Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. I'm Mr. Connor, Superintendent of Sarasota County Schools, and I'm proud to join you in this important tribute to the remarkable cultures and contributions of Hispanic Americans, the fastest growing population in the country. Just like in your school community, Sarasota County is welcoming more residents hailing from places like Puerto Rico, Cuba, El Salvador, Mexico, Guatemala, Venezuela, and other Latin American countries. 10% of Sarasota County's population is of Hispanic descent, and 19% of our community under the age of 18 are Hispanic. These families are active members of our community and contribute their time and talents to make Sarasota County a more enriching place to live. The celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month is an opportunity to show our appreciation of the many cultures that make our country, our community, and our schools unique. This appreciation and inclusivity help our schools become a vibrant and welcome place for our students. During this year's month-long celebration, from now through October 15th, I encourage you to think about how Hispanic Americans have influenced your life. Perhaps there's someone at your school that has made a difference in your day. For our Hispanic Latino students, I hope you embrace your cultural roots and share those experiences with your classmates and community. And I'm thrilled to see Hispanic Heritage Month celebrated so enthusiastically throughout our schools' communities.
And lastly, we want to just share an update as I am, I believe, around day 50 of the transition here in Sarasota County. We've recently completed a listening tour, and of that tour, we were able to complete 10 sessions. 4 were for staff, 4 were for the community. We had 1 for our Spanish speakers, and 1 virtual. We had over 282 participants throughout with over 1,100 comments that'll all be used and consolidated as I begin to digest that feedback as we create our next steps to take Sarasota to the top school district in the state of Florida. So I want to give you a little update on that and really thank our communications team led by Craig Magnolia and Mina Ajrab and Jamal Giller for their on-site IT support for each of the locations, Jamie Rodriguez, who is our supervisor of ESOL and Migrant Education, and Todd Alexander, our manager of IT, for all the IT support. So let's give our communications team a round of applause. Thank you for all you did. That is it for the superintendent's update. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know there's a number of people to thank regularly, but I do want to second the support of the communications team. You guys do an amazing job. You guys work incredibly hard, and I'm incredibly appreciative. Moving on to the next item is a hearing of citizens. I just want to note that because we are obviously not in the chambers today, things will be a little bit different, and so forgive my bumpiness at the differences. But since we don't have a buzzer, the microphone will turn off at 3 minutes. So I just want you to plan accordingly. And I will, as we know, the rules, but please note that respect for divergent viewpoints and civility will be shown at every board meeting. Whether you agree or disagree with the speaker, please listen politely and respectfully without making any sounds of approval and disapproval, including clapping. Jazz hands if you must, although we can't see much in here. I recognize there's a lot of passion and emotion with the decisions that come before this board and the impact that they have on our students, families, staff, and a community. As such, we believe it is important that we afford the opportunity for every speaker to be heard. To my fellow board members, any comments during hearing of citizens that you would like to respond to will take place at the conclusion of public comment. My request is that when you respond, you keep it to the issues that have been brought forward and refrain from directing it to any individual of the public. Per statute 1001.372(3), anyone causing a disruption will first be given a warning, and if the conduct does not stop, will be removed from the auditorium. But we won't have any of that today. So we have over 20 plus speakers. I'll speak 1 or 2 at a time, and I guess you're coming over here in the center. Okay, so I have Ron Taylor, and again, forgive me if I do not pronounce your name correctly, Maureen Keys, Jessica Thomason.
Madam Chairman and everyone, in this time of COVID and all the hurricanes of the recent past and our society's struggles, it seems so burdensome, unnecessary to go over and over something like election procedures. They were recently changed, and those changes were good. And there's no reason to jump again. I think we need to just put down low our differences of opinion and embrace each other and let the people vote.
Thank you. Maureen Keys, Jessica Thomason, Paulina Testerman.
Dr. Maureen Keys from Northport. When I began to follow the Sarasota School Board's activities, many changes were underway, all of which were being suggested or implemented in the name of academic achievement and fiscally responsible decision-making, all of which I'm very supportive as an emeritus professor from the University of Wisconsin, Department of Education. I'm very supportive of all efforts to narrow the opportunity gaps provided to students. And that's why I'm very concerned that the redistricting effort at the tune of $40,000 is really a foolish move, because there's really no logical aspect that would tie that to academic achievement or opportunities for all learners in the Sarasota district. So that's one reason. Another reason is 2 years ago, there was a failed effort determined by the electorate that this redistricting was not a smart idea. And I also read of some candidate Barker, and that this effort to change the district's boundaries would have a negative impact on her candidacy, as well as changing the times that people would be up for re-election. So I think it'd really be foolish for the board to proceed in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Thomason, Paulina Testerman, Carolyn Johnson.
Move that down a little bit. Good evening, board members. My name is Jessica Thomason. I'm a parent of 2 students in district schools and a new substitute teacher. I was surprised to hear the topic of redistricting come up last workshop, but I was shocked to see it on tonight's agenda. Why would the board even consider wasting $39,000 on a consultant to redraw the district map after only 2 years, which is 8 years premature? Is beyond my comprehension. But to rush it in just 3 months so that it will fall under the 270-day election deadline, maybe it's just a coincidence that Ms. Rose suggested this only a few hours after her District 2 opponent filed to run against her. But this is not a good look. In case no one was aware, following the county commissioner's map, as was indicated, would prevent Liz Barker from running against Karen Rose. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page and that it wasn't an oversight. I spent the day subbing at Lakeview today. It's a wonderful school with a very supportive PTO and a lot of parent engagement. Some schools have far less support, but even Lakeview could do a lot with $39,000. Imagine what a Title I school could do. $39,000 would buy nearly 8,000 reams of copy paper, 6,000 canisters of Lysol wipes. I'm sorry, 600, it's not that cheap. IXL subscriptions for a year for 25 classrooms. It would pay for 30 busloads of kids to take the Newtown trolley tour and learn about local Black history. It would cover admission for 2,000 students to the Florida Holocaust Museum in St. Pete. It would also pay for approximately 312 substitute teacher days. In the last board meeting, Ms. Rose stated, "If I need to be in schools, I'll be in schools." And, quote, "If there's a reason to take a more hands-on approach, you can bet your booties I will." Well, I want you to know that as of an hour ago, there are 259 unfilled sub-openings in the district, and most of these are for paraprofessionals. Just tomorrow alone, there are 68 spots open. Here are a few that you might consider filling. Northport High School needs an ESE para-aide, as does Booker Middle and Cranberry Elementary. Brentwood Elementary needs a pre-K ESE aide. Gulfgate and Laurel Nokomis could use subs for their autistic classrooms. Lamarck needs an ESOL sub. Inglewood needs a cafeteria aide. Oak Park needs an ESE for varying exceptionalities. Triad needs a behavior tech. And Gosio needs a receptionist. This is tomorrow. So I promise if you're willing to do the work, I guarantee you'll be using your time valuably and that it will do more for morale in the district than anything you could do at the landings. Thank you.
Thank you. Paulina Testerman, Carolyn Johnson, Carol Lerner.
Good evening. My name is Paulina Testerman, and I have 2 children in Sarasota County Public Schools. On Friday, August the 11th, the school board was informed that a woman by the name of Liz Barker planned to run against school board member Karen Rose in District 2. 4 short days later, during the workshop, school board member Karen Rose curiously announced her desire to redistrict the county and replace our current district maps with the county commissioner's district maps. Many of us didn't think much of it until we printed the maps and plotted each school board member's home on it. Instantly, we knew that Mrs. Rose was not looking to redraw the maps for legitimate reasons. We knew that Mrs. Rose was redrawing the maps because she wanted to eliminate Liz Barker as her competition. You see, if the board votes in favor of agenda item number 41 tonight, candidate Liz Barker will be erased and ineligible to run. How convenient for you, Mrs. Rose. It's important that our community know that our school district maps are to be redrawn every 10 years to ensure equal representation in each district. The last time we redrew the maps was 2021. During that December 7th school board meeting, the board voted unanimously to adopt the new maps. That means that Mrs. Ziegler, Mr. Edwards, and Mrs. Rose all voted to adopt these current district maps. Now, less than 2 years later, Mrs. Rose wants to reinvent the wheel and waste $39,000 of our tax dollars so she can remove her competition, full stop. The Karen Rose 2024 campaign motto should be, if you can't kick a field goal, move the goalpost. Mrs. Rose, this is a terrible example for our children. This move is deceptive and dishonest and proves to our community that yet again, you are putting politics ahead of financial and moral obligations. The board should consider these following issues when voting on today's agenda item number 41. Number one, why didn't Mrs. Rose put it on the workshop agenda so the board could discuss the benefits and drawbacks? Number two, how do we know that the current county commissioners' maps are fair since they too were drawn 2 years ago? Number three, is the public and the board aware of the fact that if the school board adopts the county commissioners' maps on their own, as their own, it would place Mr. Enos and Mr. Edwards both in District 4, and there would be nobody living in District 5. Do you also know that if you put that it would put Mrs. Rose and Mrs. Ziegler in District 2, and it would not leave anyone living in District 4? Should the board spend $39,000 on anything that would intentionally sway the outcome of a school board election? Do you know what teachers could do with $39,000? If the board wants to convince the community that this isn't political, then prove it. Table this discussion for 10 months and look into redistricting after the August election. This will certainly prove to our community that you care more about our students and teachers than you do about playing political hardball. Lastly, Mrs. Rose, there is a way to honor our country and our community while running for school board. Campaign with dignity and respect. Stop your husband's personal attacks on social media. Are you aware of the fact that he's accusing your opponent of lying about her resume and calling her names?
Carolyn Johnson, Carol Lerner, Lenny Silverman.
Good afternoon. My name is Carolyn Johnson, and I want to just thank you for having us here today. I've lived in Sarasota County for more than 50 years. I've raised my children and my grandchildren here. I pay a great deal of attention to what's happening in the schools because the schools drive the prosperity and the education of the community. I support our teachers. I volunteer reading programs and all kinds of other things in the schools. Today I want to talk to you about the proposed $39,000 redistricting effort initiated by Member Rose. Seemingly, Member Rose has forgotten that just 2 years ago, we did this exercise at the expense of the taxpayer, and now she wants the taxpayers to pay for it again. Why? That's the question. In 2021, it made sense. We had data from the 2020 census. It was given the full review necessary. So what's changed? We have no new data from the state. We have no new information from any comprehensive study. The next census isn't until 2030. So I ask again, why now? I find it very odd that Member Rose would initiate this proposal. Jessica and Paulina have given us some great ideas of what to do with $39,000. So I really don't have much more to say. I thought their comments were really spot on. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you very much. Carol Lerner, Lenny Silverman, Tracy Bathis.
Good evening. Carol Lerner, Support Our Schools. The idea of redrawing the school board district maps less than 2 years after they were reworked in 2021, using proper data from the 2020 census and at no cost, is an affront to democracy here in Sarasota. I say this because this action brings together two critical pillars of American democracy, the right to a fair election and the importance of an informed citizenry, which can only happen when a community has strong public schools. Strong public schools can only occur through honest school board elections that elect principled leaders. A principled leader would not put forward this redistricting proposal. Ms. Rose circumvented the democratic process by initiating steps to change the school board district maps, suggesting that they correspond with those of the Sarasota County Commission. This would throw Mrs. Rose's announced competitor, opponent, Liz Barker, into an adjoining district that is not up for an election until 2026. It would also move Rose's primary home on Siesta Key into District 2, so she would no longer have to pretend that she is living in a condo purchased just so she could run for the District 2 seat in 2020. Just like Ms. Rose initiated the firing of Superintendent Asplin less than 8 minutes after the new school board was sworn in last November, Ms. Rose repeated that process, calling for redistricting only hours after Ms. Barker announced her candidacy for Sarasota County School Board District 2. It is hard to imagine that move as being coincidental. This action may also be illegal. Did Ms. Rose read Chapter 10001.36 of the Florida statutes, which says that, quote, residence areas may not be drawn with the intent to favor or disfavor a candidate for district school board members, unquote. If this doesn't disfavor Ms. Barker, then nothing does. It is also reminiscent of how Fred Atkins' Newtown community was gerrymandered through redistricting out of his pre-existing district in 2020 to prevent him from running for Sarasota County Commissioner. But let's put the morality and legality of the issue aside for a moment. This action is also unwarranted because it is a waste of time and money. $31K is the projected cost, and that's just a start. It'll be interesting to hear Ms. Rose's rationale for this move. However she rationalizes it, it is sad that she seems to be ditching what seemed like a sincere effort to move the school board away from divisive politics, calling for what can only be construed as partisan redistricting is doing the opposite.
Thank you. Lenny Silverman, Tracy Vafis.
Good evening. My name is Lenny Silverman. We moved here in 2019 from the Washington metropolitan area. I have been an educator for 40 years in Montgomery County Public Schools. My question is, why are you spending, and this is redundant, but it needs to be said, why are you spending $39,000 on redistricting when it was done only last year or a year ago? This money could be much better spent on programs such as early childhood education, and I can think of so many other programs that would benefit the children, all of the children. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy Vafis, and Springman Ronald or Ronald Springman, I'm not sure if it's backwards. Did I say your name correctly?
No one ever does.
My apologies.
It's okay.
If you could correct me for the record.
Vafeas.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for all the safety improvements thus far at Lakeview Elementary. My name is Tracy, and I wanted to speak on the subject of school safety. I have 2 children at Lakeview Elementary. One child is in the class of a targeted teacher. There are many layers to how this has affected my family, even before this current school year. First, I understand that all children have the right to a free education. It is a great and important right. Many kids are helped out of bad situations because of this right. And for the record, I am for parental rights. But my question is, when does the school board start protecting the majority of the classroom instead of the one or a few children that cause so much distraction for the rest of the class and the teacher? The rest of the children have the same right to a free education. If my child's teacher or school contacted me about my child and stated there were behavioral concerns or issues and that there needed to be some form of intervention, like counseling, testing, therapy, just to name a few, I would be on board and asking, what else can I do? You see, I know the teachers, aides, administration, and support staff are professionals when it comes to children, their behavior, and their development. I'm a mom, not a professional when it comes to children. I have 2 children, but I do not have a degree or certification that states I'm fit to raise my 2 children, to guide them, to educate them, or even defend my child's actions. So if a professional wants to speak with me and my husband about our child's behavior, you better bet we will be all ears and thankful. As some of us in this room know all too well, not all parents are like that. Sadly, it is the kids of those parents who have always suffered. But nowadays, the whole class is suffering worse than ever before. This includes the teachers, the guidance counselors, administration, bus drivers, substitute teachers, you name it. In the past few weeks, more and more parents are speaking out, talking, emailing each other, group texts, private IMs, private groups, and stories are being shared. It is shocking what I have heard. A nobody like me. I take everything with a grain of salt, but my eyes have been open. At a time post-COVID when I thought I could never be more grateful for teachers and every other adult that works in any school, here I am more grateful. Mind blown, heart aching, and just frozen at times. What can be done and where do we start? When will the child professionals trump a parent who is not a professional for the greater good of the rest of the students and faculty? How many of those professionals' opinions or documented situations will it take? Thank you.
Thank you. Springman Ronald, Sebastian Martinez, Rana Benzini.
Ronald Springman, 2-year Vietnam vet. I visited the workshop today and have concerns of what was not covered on safety issues, namely COVID. First, a few undisputed facts. There are 7 states with 10 million or more population, with Florida having 21.5 million, behind Texas 29 million, and California's 40 million. But Florida leads those 2 highly populated states in COVID deaths per million. Currently, Florida has over 90,000 deaths behind Texas's 94,000 deaths and California's 104,000. But Florida leads all 7 states with the most COVID deaths per million of over 4,200, while California only has 2,600 in comparison. Also, currently, Florida has the highest weekly hospitalizations of over 400. Florida, Texas, and Tennessee governors banned mask mandates in the summer of 2021 when the Delta variant was taking hold of the country, which led to those states running out of ICU beds, and Hospital Corporation of America, founded by the great Rick Scott, made record-breaking profits that year and in 2022. Those 3 states house the majority of HC hospitals. However, in early 2021, DeSantis recommended the public should get the vaccine and wear masks for protection if they so chose to. Also, remember, DeSantis said in June of 2020, Florida would never be like New York. New York now has over 12,000 less deaths than Florida. Now, with a new variant coming and a vaccine which offers added protection, the governor and his Dr. Quack are telling the public the vaccine does not work, when in fact no other state has made that claim, and most are telling the public to follow CDC recommendations. I am calling on this board to recommend parents and grandparents of our students get the vaccine so our students do not have to lose any more loved ones. My family and I have had the vaccine beginning in 2021 with follow-up boosters when the school board lifted the mask mandate in 2022. When the school board lifted the mask mandate in 2022, we contracted COVID twice that year with only 1 or 2 days of slight symptoms, so please encourage Sarasota residents to get the vaccine. COVID has been politicized way too much, and it must stop. This country needs leaders who listen to the science and not the mob for dollars.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. Sebastian Martinez, Rana Benzini, Barbara Vaughn.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Mr. Superintendent. My name is Sebastian Martinez. I'm a graduated student, and today I wanted to speak against and ask that you vote no on the redistricting of our school board maps when we didn't redistrict that long ago. In a workshop in August, Karen Rose brought up the redistricting of our school board maps to match the county commission. This is a strategic and political move, which if it were to go as Karen suggested, her political opponent would be ineligible for election for another 2 years, disenfranchising her opponent as well as community members, students, teachers, parents, and grandparents that want to vote Rose out. And say the disenfranchising of our community wasn't an issue, neglecting their voices and pleas. But it is a blatant waste of almost $40,000 of taxpayer money. But this isn't new when it comes to Karen Rose. In this very room, Karen motioned to have Superintendent Asplin removed without cause, which to my memory was around $170,000, if not more. Hundreds of speakers and community members showed up against her motion, and she ignored the community. Although I'm happy with Mr. Connor, it's important to highlight that there was no transparency. It blindsided our community, and there was no alleged fiscal conservatism. When it came to Vermillion, another $28,000 bill for taxpayers. Yet again, hundreds of community members showed up. Vermillion failed, but still, Karen voted against her constituents, ready to waste more taxpayer money. No transparency and no fiscal conservatism. And now redistricting another $39,000 of taxpayer money to benefit nobody but herself. Then the media shrugs it off as something silly. When she brought it up, the superintendent recommended getting input from the community, hearing from people in Sarasota. And Karen Rose was unsure about listening to the community, which doesn't come as a surprise. And shout out to the transparency page. I love when I passionately agree with them. It's not a Republican, Democrat, or independent issue. It's a gross misuse of taxpayer dollars to do something we already did 2 years ago. But if we really want to redistrict, I'm for representing South County. But don't do it as a political opponent files for election. Wait until after the election and prove it's not for political gain. Single-handedly, just since the swearing in of this board, Karen Rose is responsible for spending over $250,000 on political, non-student focused decisions. With that money and with our budget, we could be and should be raising teacher pay. Our teachers are working 2 to 3 jobs as bartenders and retail or whatever just to get by, spending upwards of $800 on classroom supplies. With the crushing cost of living, Florida's inflation, and pay not being enough to live where you work. How can we expect teachers to want to stay here? We always say teachers aren't teaching for pay, and that's right, but they should be. Teachers are professionals that are teaching future generations, yet as we burn them out and act clueless when they leave. We could raise their pay, cover the cost of classroom materials, or if you want to benefit every student, provide free lunches regardless of income, because students go hungry at school, and everything that was mentioned prior. My point is, if we are going to spend taxpayer money, we should be putting that money back into our taxpayers, into the kids, into their families. We shouldn't be wasting it on useless political points. Focus on students. And if you care about fiscal conservatism, if you care about community representation, representative government, if you care about our students, if you care about high-achieving schools, then I highly suggest you get involved. Put in the work now so that next August our community can help retire Rose. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Rana Benzini, Barbara Vaughn, Pauline Geary.
Good evening. My name is Rana Bazzini, and I'm a Sarasota resident, but I have no children or grandchildren in the system, and that doesn't mean I don't care about others. Woke may be dead in Florida, but after the last school board election, there's been an awakening. When the first action of the new board was to dismiss Dr. Asplin, those who had not been paying attention started showing up at board meetings and challenging their decisions. The reaction to hiring Vermillion and the board's ultimate decision not to is an example. Paying attention was happening on both sides. It's encouraging to see a spirit of camaraderie at the workshops. I do enjoy that. Having said that, it does not mean we can let down our guard. I'm here tonight to address item 41 on tonight's agenda, the proposal to hire a consultant addressing redrawing the boundaries of school board districts. Since this was done in 2021, I'm puzzled as to the reason it is necessary to do it again. It will require a not insignificant amount of money and time. My curiosity is piqued regarding the motivation. Is there an ulterior motive? Is there the possibility that redistricting would affect which candidates are eligible to run in the next school board election? Other speakers have addressed that more eloquently than I. I do hope the board will rethink this unnecessary undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Vaughn, Pauline Geary, Mary Ellen Palermo.
Good evening, board members and audience members. I'm Barbara Vaughn, and you know why I'm here. I'm here to pray. If you would join me, that would be wonderful. If not, do whatever makes you happy. Lord, tonight we pray for our children. We pray that our children will always feel loved and protected. We pray, Lord, that they will grow in self-confidence and learn to trust in their own judgment. Help them to be especially sensitive and discriminating about who and what they believe.
Protect them from people who will mislead them, even lie to them for their own selfish and sometimes evil purposes. We pray, Lord, that they will be drawn to you and learn to live in your love and shun all expressions of evil, such as racism or anti-Semitism or classism or any other ism. Help them, please, Lord, to grow up to be happy, loving, peaceful, successful men and women who worship you, our one and only God, in whatever expression of religion they choose. And be with the adults in their lives, Lord, their parents, other family members, teachers, advisors, faith leaders, that they should always train our children well, always with the very best intentions for them. And Lord, we ask you to strike down any who would seek to deceive our children or do them harm. These things we ask in your name, Lord, Yahweh, Elohim, Adonai, El Shaddai, Redeemer, King of Kings, everlasting Father. Amen.
Thank you. Pauline Geary, Mary Ellen Palermo. My eyes are getting bad, I'm sorry.
Hi, I am Pauline Carey, Madam Chairman, board members, superintendent. I'm here actually to read part of a letter that my friend Sarah Little, Dr. Sarah Little, who lives in the city of Sarasota, but she's unable to be here tonight. Her letter is addressed to the Sarasota School Board. I strongly recommend that the Sarasota School Board vote against the redistricting proposal requested by Karen Rose. First of all, redistricting was just completed a couple of years ago. Secondly, it would be unlawful according to state law. Residents, quote, residents areas may not be drawn with the intent to favor or disfavor a candidate for district school board member or incumbent board member. This redistricting request by Karen Rose is a blatant political move to prevent Liz Barker from running against her, and hence a violation of this law. The total focus of our school board at this time should be on helping our new superintendent, Mr. Connor, be successful in his position. The school board's attention needs to be on how they can help assure our students receive the best education possible. These unnecessary political distractions take away from our students, teachers, and administrators from accomplishing their task of helping all students to achieve and learn. At the beginning of another difficult school year, this political distraction is the last thing our school systems needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Ellen Palermo, Mary Ann DeQuino-Pearl, Norman Wirtz.
Hi, I'm Mary Ellen Palermo, a resident of Venice, and thank you for coming down here. Hope you do it more often in the future. But when I did see on the agenda the item number 41 for the school board district map, I felt I had to speak, since I was also surprised to see that Karen Rose actually filed to run in District 2. Who doesn't know here that Karen Rose lives on Siesta Key, District 4? Yet here she is about to vote today on an item on the agenda about school board district lines, requiring that school board members live in the district that they represent. Does she even know District 2? 4 years ago, I remember how she was harassing through her husband, Daniel Miller, and making fun of her opponent because of his financial situation that wasn't as nice as her situation. He was a man who had raised 4 children. They all went to public schools and completed college. And yet Karen and her husband felt good about making his financial situation a public campaign issue as he didn't get to live in a $1 million house on Siesta Key like they did. But when she needed an address in District 2, didn't she purchase a condo in the same complex that her opponent was living at the same time? Coincidentally, I was a census worker in 2020 also, and I got assigned the building that Karen Rose used as an address to run for school board, as she hadn't been able to win in her own District 4 the previous time. After 3 attempts to contact residents of the building, nobody was ever home in the building of about 8 different condos. Karen Rose had also owned a condo in that building. I was required to seek neighbors that would know residents there and that could give me some census information that I could put down on the census records of the residents. A group of neighbors across the street from the building were there, and I asked them about who lived in the building. I was told they were all transients that lived there. They suspected drug use. People just come and go. They didn't know any of the residents that were in that particular building. But yet that's the building Karen Rose thought was good enough to use to claim residency in District 2, while making fun of her opponent, who actually worked a full-time job and lived in another section of that exact same complex. Of course, Mrs. Rose was not actually living in that building, or District 2, of course. When I mentioned to Dan Miller, alias Karen Rose, about my experience, suddenly her address changed to a new condo in a new complex on the other side of Clark Street. Now that she has a new opponent, they are actually criticizing how long Mrs. Barker has lived in District 2, even.
Thank you. Marianne DeQuino-Turl, Norman Wirtz, Richard Stammer.
Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Connor, Mr. Duggan. My name is Marianne DeQuino-Turl, and I am a Sarasota County resident and taxpayer since 2008. I am here this evening to share my irritation at your ongoing ability, Mrs. Miller, to keep politics out of virtually any decision you make. You are now proposing to spend nearly $40,000 to redraw school board districts, though this was done in 2021 for free, I might add, by Shirley Brown and Charlie Kennedy, using census-provided figures. Since the census was done in 2020 and has not been redone in 2022, I'm assuming the information hasn't changed. According to my count, using only publicly available information, Mrs. Miller has spent $170,000 to settle Dr. Asplin's contract, not including the cost for health care, and not including his wife's severance and health care. Then you spent over $35,000 to hire a consulting firm for the superintendent search. Welcome, Mr. Connor, we're excited you're here. Now you're looking to spend $40,000. So the way that I add, it works out to about $250,000. Nothing to somebody with $1 million condo on Siesta Key. Calling for this expenditure, which will achieve nothing of benefit for the students, teachers, staff of the Sarasota County schools, seems to me egregious. And proposing it hours after you discover that you will face a tough re-election, you look desperate. Since I'm not an attorney, I would very much appreciate hearing from the taxpayer-paid attorney sitting on the dais about the legality of this proposal as it applies to Florida Statute 1001.36. Thank you.
Thank you. Norman Wirtz, Richard Stammer, Andrea Doria Kale.
Yes, hello. I was going to speak on this waste of $39,000, but it's been handled better than I could. What I'd like to talk about is this article about vouchers pay for TV's Disney. A new list of allowable expenses for the Florida school program raises some questions. As Florida lawmakers expanded eligibility for school vouchers this year, they also gave parents more ways to spend the money. Theme park passes, 55-inch TVs, and stand-up paddle boards are among the approved items that recipients can buy to use at home. I love this one. Supporters of the expansion don't consider this program as wasting taxpayer money. They see it as allowing families to customize education according to their students' interests. I think that's super. $43,000 on treadmills, $30,000 on trampolines, $22,000, $226,000 on game consoles. And when you add it all up, there's 123,000 new students on the voucher program. At $8,000 a student, that's $984 million of taxpayer money that's not going into the public schools, but's going into these schools where they're buying the TVs and whatnot. And there will be 243,000 students getting vouchers. That's $1.944 billion of our taxpayer money that's going into these schools. And why don't we put that money back here? That's why we're the 45th lowest teacher salary in the country, is because we got billions of dollars for vouchers that aren't necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Stammer, Andrea Doria Kale, I apologize between the lights and my vision, and then Noreen Hemping.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Richard Stammer, and I am a retired child welfare professional of 36 years and a 21-year resident of Sarasota County. While sitting here listening to the discussions, I honestly couldn't help but be reminded of a famous line from Rosanna Dana on Saturday Night Live. It's always something. And of course today, the something is item 41, the approval of contract for analysis and generation of redistricting maps for board member voting districts. I can only think of a brief definition, which is gerrymander, manipulate the boundaries of an electoral constituency so as to favor one party or class. I do not really feel the need to go over and the same comments and opinions that many of my predecessors here have. I would just like to say that I don't really know why there's a need for there to be a redistricting discussion, since, as others have pointed out, it was done 2 years ago after the 2020 census. All I do know is I care about appearance. This is not a good look for the Sarasota County Board of Education. I would like simply, let's just move on, vote no on item 41, and let's just have a fair election and let the chips fall where they may. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea Doria Kale, Noreen Hemping, Bernadette Collins.
Hi, I'm Andrea Doria Kale. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Everything everybody else said. That's number one. I urge you to oppose redistricting. I've heard it violates the law. Redistricting was completed at no cost in 2021 and was voted by the board members unanimously. I have not heard one single person speak in support of redistricting. It will cost taxpayers approximately $39,000. I thought the school board was nonpartisan. It appears to me this is right out of the partisan playbook. If you can't beat them, cheat them.
Thank you. Noreen Hemping, Bernadette Collins, Bettina K. Beer.
Good evening. I am Dr. Noreen Hemping. I'm a retired educator and psychologist. My undergraduate degree was elementary education. I hold a permanent New York State teacher's license. I taught 4 years in New York, then 1 year in Hillsborough County. I was asked by the principal to be a Title I teacher as a dilapidated inner city school was being, quote, integrated, AKA the white kids were coming. Seared in my memory are two concepts. First, in loco parentis, a teacher's sacred obligation to care deeply about every student entrusted to us. This trust was mutual. Now, teachers are afraid. They feel threatened, intimidated, and worry which student in front of them may be a snitch. Teachers are leaving the profession, leaving Florida, whose public schools rank at the bottom. Florida also has a shortage of 6,900 teachers. Second, public education is, quote, the backbone of a democracy. Now, public education is under attack from extremist politicians. Millions of taxpayer dollars are diverted to non-public schools with little or no accountability. While I am proud of my Catholic education, no taxpayer dollars were involved. I earned 2 graduate degrees from state universities. I became a licensed psychologist and licensed marriage and family therapist. I worked frequently with school staff on behalf of students. Regarding school safety, I support trained resource officers, not police, in the schools. As an educator, I would die rather than have a gun in my possession in a classroom. Next, curriculum. Parents should always have a seat at the table. However, education specialists should set curriculum. Next, book banning and threats to librarians is wrong. Next, attacks on special needs students, such as EBD students, gay and lesbian, and yes, transgender students are heinous. These extremist politicians remind me of Don Quixote chasing after woke dragons. Why? Next, Moms for Liberty is a nasty, misguided group spreading misinformation. What is their real end game? Far afield from the scripture I learned, that is, love one another. Oh, and lastly, Ms. Rose, pressing the new superintendent to redraw lines to rid yourself of an opponent. Really?
Bernadette Collins, Bettina Beer, Liz Barker. And that will conclude public comment.
Good evening. My name is Bernadette Collins, and I'm new to Sarasota County. I have been a teacher and a student in 2 other states, and I'd like to strongly oppose the redistricting. I think, in addition to everything that's already been said here, which I won't repeat, this is going to only cause more confusion in already voter climate, which I don't think is necessary or needed. I've been in other states and other school districts. I've never seen so much time wasted by a school board on politics. It's just sad what's happening here. So I'm going to ask you all, I'm not going to attack you. I know you're all trying to do the best job that you can, but I'm going to ask you to search your conscience and focus your time, attention, and money on making this a better school district and supporting our kids and our families, because Lord knows we have enough problems. We don't need this. You know, we've been through 2 increases in electric bills. We've been through 2 hurricanes. Lots of us still have damage to our homes we're trying to deal with. We've had increases in homeowners insurance to the point where some can't even afford it anymore. Let's focus on getting us the help that we need. And ask our students what they need. Ask them what they want. Really get into the schools and find out what's going on. It sounds like your superintendent has, but ask the kids what they really need. This they don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Bettina Beer, Liz Barker.
Hi, my name is Dr. Tina Beer. I'm the former Dean of Liberal Arts at Ringling College of Art and Design, and have lived in Sarasota since 1984. I never thought I'd be up here talking to a school board about academic freedom, but I'm extremely concerned for our teachers. The classroom has to be free of politics. It has to be the place, a safe place where you can explore ideas, where you can have students exposed to other viewpoints. Yes, different, often threatening, but that's what the world is. So I agree with everything that's been said previously. I am amazed that the redistricting is your main concern. I really am. Support your teachers, support academic freedom. Let's get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz Barker.
Superintendent Connor, board members, good evening. I'm Liz Barker, mom of 4 kids in Sarasota County Public Schools, former school psychologist, candidate for school board, and president of the PTO at Lakeview Elementary School. First, I'd like to thank others who've brought up the redistricting issue on the agenda. They make excellent points, and I would urge the board to consider what they have to say. Although this issue would affect me directly, I want to focus instead on another item on the agenda, one that will affect our teachers and staff and ultimately all of us. We must make sure that we are paying our teachers a salary that allows them to support themselves considering all the factors. On the agenda today is a rise in healthcare costs for our teachers and staff. And while I completely understand that the board does not have control over rising healthcare costs and that a rise may be unavoidable, we must take it into consideration as we decide what to pay our teachers. If these costs must be passed on to teachers, we will be making an already difficult situation worse. Even if those costs won't be passed on, our teacher pay must still be addressed. The average median teacher pay is $54,517 in Sarasota County. To put it into perspective, area median income in Sarasota is close to $100,000 per household. This means that most of our teachers without another income can't afford to live in Sarasota County. Right now, we have many teachers who are making very long commutes because they cannot afford to live in the communities in which they teach. Ultimately, if we cannot increase our teachers' salaries or they get lower, we will continue to lose the qualified professionals our schools rely on. One of the traditional benefits of being a teacher has been predictability. If teachers do not receive attractive benefits, we will continue to see them moving on to the private sector. I was pleased to hear the board consider including teacher pay as a legislative priority for this year's session at the workshop this afternoon. Thank you. I urge the board to lobby Tallahassee to increase teacher salaries in line with the increased cost of health insurance and cost of living, to ensure that we continue to recruit and retain highly effective educators. Highly effective educators are the most important factor in student success. Making sure their professionalism is valued by paying them a living wage is vital to our shared mission of improving our academic outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. I do want to ask, just because there was a lot, well, I always want to address the public comment. However, I know that much of that was on an agenda item, so I don't want to go too far down that road. But for clarity, because I believe there was a significant amount of inaccurate, but I do want to hear from the general counsel in general before we dive in. And what I wrote down, just to clarify, because it's fresh in mind, that it's my understanding any redistricting cannot legally impact eligibility.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So House Bill 411 was passed this past legislative session, and it made some changes to the statute in question, which is 1001.36. It added 2 sentences. One of those sentences reads, resident areas may not be drawn with the intent to favor or disfavor a candidate for a district school board member or an incumbent district school board member based on the candidate's or incumbent's residential address.
Thank you. And I just, again, this is on agenda number 41. I want to make sure at least I'm happy to entertain. There are a lot of statements made of which I want to make sure legal clarifies, but because we're not at the agenda item, I just wanted to address public comment in that area. If there are are there any additional comments before we move forward? Mrs. Rose.
Yes, I would like to address the comments that were made. I have no intention, nor does anyone on this board have any intention of doing anything that isn't within the confines of the law, or have not and would not. There is no intent to impact any candidate of any nature. I understand that one of the local political parties did a call to action for this tonight. I respect that. But there is no intent, no action to remove any candidate. It is illegal to do so, and that has been the case since July 5th, I believe. Is that correct? July 4th or 5th, there was a new law. So it is not even possible, the accusations that were made this evening.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments? We don't have QEs. QEs? Qers. Just so everyone know. If there are no additional comments, and again, thank you everyone for coming, and further discussion on that. Much of public comment will come forward during new business. Moving on to item number 5 is additions or corrections to the agenda. Mr. Connor, are there any revisions?
Madam Chair, we have item 4, the September 18th budget meeting minutes were added. Item 5, an addendum was added to the instructional classified personnel report. And item 7, the catalog for professional learning calendar was added.
Thank you very much. Is there any, do I have a motion?
I move for approval of the consent agenda as amended.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as amended. Are there any comments? I just have 2 comments. I wanted to highlight item number 30, which is our capital improvement plan. We talked during our workshop today about an improved systems and process when it came to our policies, but I have to tip my hat off to our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Dumas, who does an incredible job, and their entire team. I can kind of see some of you. But there's a lot of undertaking in that, and I believe as we talk about different areas and systems of improvement, on the policy side, completely separate, I would be remiss if I said that I really do believe that the operational side, you guys do an incredible job, so thank you very much for that. And then I also wanted to identify item number 37. It was mentioned also in public comment about the increased health insurance cost. We are self-insured. We had a workshop on this. This is certainly not something any of us look forward to doing. I know historically we've had incredible ability to have very, very, very low comparably to any other district, but even from the open market, from an increase standpoint. However, this is an adjustment, but it is not lost. I don't want to fully speak for the board, so chime in if I'm incorrect here, but it's not lost on any of us that rising costs in any manner is challenging. And while we do provide incredible benefits, and again, a big thanks to our finance department and our risk management department, we are very, very aware of that impact and will be continuously looking at ways to alleviate that pinch. If there are no additional comments, I'm going to do a roll call, and I'll start with Mr. Edwards on the consent agenda as amended.
Yes.
Mrs. Enos?
Yes.
Mrs. Rose?
Yes.
Mrs. Marinelli?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, and the motion to pass the consent agenda as amended passes unanimously. Moving on to items for new business. Item number 39, is there a motion?
May I make the motion?
Certainly.
This motion, and I have the distinct honor and the privilege for approval to name the Riverview High School football field the John Sprague Field.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second about the naming of Riverview High School football field to the John Sprague Field. Are there any comments?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Mr. Enos.
So I'm going to go ahead and just read some of the accomplishments of Coach Sprague. I'm sure he doesn't remember back when he started coaching football, and I was one of the first kids that were out there, but I can't tell the stories. Anyway, what I do want to talk about is Coach Sprague has made many contributions to Florida high school sports as an athletic director, as a track coach, and also as a golf coach. But during his football coaching career, it truly stands out.
Coach Sprague's football coaching career ended in 2010 with a 230-win, 98-loss record, 11 district championships, 15 playoff appearances, 6 regional championships, 2 state championship game appearances. You will also see that during that time period, which this is really the incredible piece, because I know everybody who knows Coach Sprague knows that his true passion is for his players, 100%, as my boys and daughter also played for Coach, as well as I am a Riverview graduate as my children. But this is the amazing thing. 253 Riverview football players went on to play college football on scholarship. That is absolutely incredible. Coach Sprague also coached 52 All-State players and had 16 players that received All-American recognition. Some of his accolades: he was an athletic director at Riverview from 1981 to 2010. In football, from 1981 to 2010, he was the head varsity coach. He was state finalist in 88 and 90. He was regional champions in 88, 90, 91, 93, 94, and 04. District champions, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 94, 95, 96, 99, 2001, 2007, 2008. District runner-up, 97, 2000, 2002, and 2004. Nike Coach of the Year, FHSAA Dairy Farmers 6-H Coach of the Year not once but twice in 1994 and 1996. Sarasota Herald Tribune Coach of the Year, 1984, 88, 89, 90, 94, 96, and 2004. NFL Tampa Bay Buccaneers Coach of the Week in 2003 and 2005. Eaton Rapids, Michigan Sports Hall of Fame Coach Award in 2005. NFL High School Coach of the Year finalist in 2006. NFL High School Coach of the Year in 2010. Riverview High School Athletic Hall of Fame in 2011. Riverview during that time period was nationally ranked 7 times by USA Today. 7 times. 235 players signed college scholarships. In track, district champions girls, 85, 94, 97, 2000, and 2007. State champions, 2005, and it has some individual accomplishments. Boys regional champions, 89, 98, 2005. Boys district champions in track, 1984, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 93, 94, 95, 98, 02, 05, and 2012. Also, he does coach the golf team. 2 district and 1 regional title and 1 individual state champion in 2022. I also know personally of many students that Coach took under his wing during that time period, and that really had an unbelievable impact on their life. I know that I had a personal relationship with Coach Sprague when I was at the Sheriff's Office. I had a personal relationship as the Chief of Police, and a personal relationship as a school board, and a huge supporter of his. I know specifically of a young man on the golf team that he took under his wings. Coach Sprague has given over 3 decades to the Riverview community and continues to make the Ram Nation a better place. I humbly ask of our fellow board members to consider naming Riverview's football field the John Sprague Field in gratitude of his service to the Riverview community. All of our high schools have buildings or fields named after people who influenced generations of children, encourage them to see greater futures for themselves and their families. I highly doubt that I will see a coach like Coach Sprague again. His dedication and his passion for the students is a gift that we are forever grateful for, as he's chose the Riverview community to be that recipient. So I humbly ask the board to approve that as the John Sprague Field. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for those comments. Are there any additional comments before we call the question?
I think it's worth noting that Coach Sprague also came, while all of this was going on, and came to the middle school and mentored students as well. and spread his wings far and wide, and we recognize and appreciate that, in addition to his wife also serving Sarasota County students. It is an education family.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments?
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Marinelli.
Coach Bragg, I met you many, 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 many years ago, and you are one of those personalities that is larger than life. You probably don't remember meeting me. I was a much, much younger person, but you made an impression on me, and I think it's an honor to name Riverview Stadium after you, and it's been a pleasure knowing you for 40-some years. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments? Mr. Edwards, excuse me.
I have not met you, but I've heard your legacy, and it's outstanding. And what's amazing is that you're here tonight, surrounded by your family, surrounded by the colleagues from Riverview, and our A-rated school district. We stand on your shoulders. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I have to first thank Mr. Enos. Years ago, we had a policy where we weren't able to name any facilities or any elements after some people. And if you hear, after one of the first policies Mr. Enos introduced becoming a board member was the ability to recognize and name the wonderful heroes that, as mentioned, influence generations. And it's truly the coaches, the teachers, and I think it's so important, and it's a great honor to be able to support a motion like this after hearing pages and pages and pages of a life's work in which you have absolutely influenced for the better generations, not only just the students, but certainly the staff and the entire community. And so we thank you deeply for your commitment, your family's commitment, and I am very excited to support this motion. So if there are no additional comments, we'll take roll call, and I'll start with Mr. Edwards.
Yes.
Mr. Enos?
As a proud Riverview graduate, absolutely yes.
Mrs. Rose?
An outstanding yes.
Mrs. Marinelli?
An emphatic yes.
And I excitedly vote yes as well, and that passes unanimously to, and I'm proud to announce that the Riverview High School football field is now named John Sprague Field.
Coach, if you can make your way up, Coach.
I think we're going to be welcoming up to the stage. That was fun. Thank you again, and thank you to the coach and to the entire Rams team for showing up. Appreciate that. As they make their way off the stage, we have moving on to the next item of new business. Item number 40, is there a motion?
I move that the new job description for the Family Navigator be approved as presented.
I have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second, are there any comments? Seeing none, I just wanted to highlight, we'll ask the superintendent actually if you could just overview what this new job description entails.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. The Family Navigator job description, as approved, will result in 2 new positions as outlined in our mental health allocation plan that was recently approved by this board and by the Florida Department of Education. This position of the 2 will be assigned to support students and families enrolled in North County schools, and one of the positions will be assigned to support students and families enrolled in our South County schools. The positions will be focused on working with families to remove any barriers that are impeding their child from receiving mental health or behavioral health services. Throughout Sarasota County, there can be an extensive wait list with agencies, and many times with those wait lists, the families kind of fall off in terms of receiving the necessary supports and services. I will say that these positions will engage directly with the parents of our students. At no time will the Family Navigator be engaging directly with the students without parental consent, and we will make sure that that is always the case. But I think this will streamline the connection because it can be somewhat labor intensive in order to get connected to the right service and agencies out within the community. And so the Navigator will help streamline that process.
Thank you for those comments. I just want to make a couple points that I will say. When I was a new board member, and one of the things I heard regularly from parents was just, and this is everywhere, this is not unique to Sarasota, just the bureaucracy that does exist inside of the school district and the challenges if you're not familiar with it. So particularly when we have so many services and opportunities to provide to students for them to excel, I believe a position like this can be support families. And however, I do appreciate the notion that this is to work in partnership with parents, with their consent. I know our team works very hard, and I hate to be redundant, but we're at a moment in time where that conversation is a concern, and I want to make sure we address it head on, and want to make sure that that is loud and clear. I know it is for the board, I know it is by this administration, I know it is by staff, but it never hurts to just remind everyone that we do take this seriously. So if there are no additional comments, Mr. Edwards, did you have a comment?
I just have a question in terms of how many Family Navigators do you anticipate?
We will use 2. So we'll have 1 in North County and 1 in South County.
Awesome, thank you.
And if there are no additional comments, we'll do a roll call. Again, the job description for Family Navigator be approved as presented. I'll start with Mr. Edwards.
Yes.
Mr. Enos.
Yes.
Mrs. Rose.
Yes.
Mrs. Marinelli.
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, and the motion to approve the new job description for Family Navigator is approved as presented. Moving on to the next item of new business, item number 41. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I move that we approve the contract for analysis and generation of redistricting maps for board member voting districts.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second for discussion.
I have a motion and a second that the contract for the analysis and generation of redistricting maps be approved as presented. I will open it up for conversation. And you guys have to put your fingers up or just start talking. Mr. Edwards.
I'll start it off.
Okay.
This has happened to me once before, and I'll take ownership of it, but when something comes up in member comments at a workshop, and then I find myself at the dais voting on an agenda item, and all of the work that happens in between without a workshop, I'm going to view this discussion as the workshop that I think we should have had. And so if I I can get clarification specifically why my colleague, and let me also say, before I go there, that we have worked, I think, incredibly hard as a board to avoid distraction these last months. Welcoming a new superintendent and really staying focused on academic achievement. Our work today at the workshop, which I think were 2 workshops in a row where we had just all on the same page and focused on high academic achievement. And this, to me, which I did discuss with the superintendent, I just viewed it as a distraction, a complete and total and unnecessary distraction that took our community and the lengthy public comments this evening focused on that distraction. So I don't want to be perceived as the dissenter of the, I'm willing to keep an open mind and be persuaded that this is a great idea to spend $39,000, which for the life of me, I have worked for these last weeks trying to figure out why that's a good idea. So I'm all ears.
Thank you. Additional comments?
Sure. There hasn't been any work done, and it's open tonight for discussion. The school board workshop, there was a consensus to go forward with it. And the distraction, I'm going to be pretty upfront, was a call to action by the Democratic Party. And that's fine, that's okay, but the comments are representing a group, and that is their right to be represented and for you to have your concerns. I don't have a preference either way. There was a dialogue at a workshop where everyone agreed to take it forward. So to single me out, I'm getting prepared for the upcoming months. That's the way I see it. And I'm absolutely fine with that.
Thank you. Additional comments?
I was just going to say is that it's my understanding from the approval of the contract, I know statutorily, I know that there is a deadline and there's a guideline in reference to anything that happens, but my understanding is this is the contract in order to look at it, but without actually any recommendations of any boundaries, or that as in more of a fact-finding as to see if it can be with the county as it relates to that, as well as is to get recommendations from this person on moving forward. I know that that was my understanding of this, and that it definitely was not going to something that was going to occur, but that we were going to contract with this person in order to show us what, to see if we were able to make it in line with what the county was doing and regarding to the county commission as my understanding. And for that reason, that was what I thought that this was regarding. It's not an actual redistricting, but the contract in order to explore, to try to make it to match with what the county commission was for the current county zones.
Thank you.
Yes, I would just like to also reiterate that at no time did any board member say that Ms. Barker was going to be moved. I do not know where that came from. I can only surmise, but not a single board member, or when this was brought up, was that ever discussed. You can shake your heads. If you can show it on the tape where that was brought up, that we said we were going to move her, I'd like to see it, because I certainly don't remember that ever being the intent.
If I may, just if we can keep it to the issue instead, I just ask board members refrain from mentioning members of the public.
If I may.
Do you have any more? I apologize for interrupting. Is there any additional
No, I
comments?
said all I needed to say.
Thank you. Mr. Edwards.
So aside from calling out the Democratic Party, and I think I'm not, and this again, I'm going back to our own procedure. I'm going to hang there for a second. When it was presented in member comments, just because there's no, I think it was Mr. Duggan who may have said this to me, there was no pushback, so no pushback does not constitute a vote. does not constitute a moving forward from this board in terms of we're going to go ahead and look at which consultant, all of the activities that, frankly, after I had that very brief conversation with Mr. Duggan, I think about 10 days went by, and I sent Mr. Connor a text, and I said, I haven't heard anything about this redistricting. I'm assuming it's a dead issue. And no offense to Mr. Connor, because I feel that he's kind of stuck in the middle of this, what seems, and I'm taking him completely off the hook. His reply was, I'm putting it on the next workshop. The next thing I heard was the email that Mr. Connor put out that laid out, we've already interviewed a consultant, the one that we all got. It's not that we've already interviewed a consultant. We're going to discuss it. I'm not quite sure, but I do know that that email lays out after we hire or go through this motion tonight, that at $39,000, that we're voting on whatever the consultant does on the 17th, and that is from, I didn't give pushback. And if I'm supposed to give pushback, I need to know that. I need to know that I should say, I'm assuming that this conversation will be workshopped, and we will have a conversation as a board, because all of this blew by, and I really had lengthy conversations with Mr. Connor to get this on tonight's agenda to be voted, because frankly, it didn't really need to be, because it falls under the price that Mr. Connor is able to approve. So I was able to say all of what I just shared with all of you as board members, and I felt that I and the public deserved a workshop, and I still am throwing back out there why we need to spend $39,000. I don't care about the Democratic Party. I don't care. Why is this something that is so valuable when I think there are 3 school board members on this dais that were elected with the districts that we all voted for? So why do we have to change them when the law doesn't say we have to? Where is the need to spend $39,000? And then, once I hear that, then I can maybe debate and discuss it a little further.
So I just have a couple comments. I will say, process-wise, well, I'll go from a historical. I have been on the board, and where it has been, redistricting has been brought up. Yes, statutorily, and I'm going to actually defer to Mr. Duggan, because there are things that changed. I want to make sure all the board has clarity, and also the public, because I think that's obviously a great place to start. However, I just want to highlight to Mr. Edwards that, it was brought up in August. I would agree that this is our opportunity. Is this should have been a workshop? I'm indifferent, honestly. I'm not privy to the conversation about being on a workshop. However, I will say that this superintendent, I don't know that this is a discussion for the superintendent. Clearly, it's stipulated in the in statute that this is under the purview of the board, however that goes, and to really insulate the superintendent from any discussion on this, I think it is in the best interest that we just keep it at the board table. Therefore, that being said, when it was brought up during a workshop, my point was, if my priority is making sure it's done transparently and legally, and this is the opportunity to discuss it. So at that point, my understanding, Mr. Duggan, this is where I believe the board and public, and myself included from a public discussion, need clarity on the legal allowance, the limitations, and the need when it comes down to redistricting, because there is language that states that about the balance. I will say historically, and that's why I made those comments when it was brought up by Mrs. Rose, is that I want to ensure this is done and debated and discussed publicly, because my past experience as a board member when it was brought up before was not that case. And so I appreciate your comments. That was not intended. I just didn't want the superintendent to get sucked into anything that could even be perceived political per se. And that way we have a balanced discussion here with legal counsel and to decide which way we want to go. And then, if I understand, this is the evaluation of whether or not to hire a consultant to evaluate it. There was statements made that, yes, this was done in 2021 with a former board member counseling as well as a member of the legal team at Shoemaker Loop. There was all sorts of speculation that it was being done for political reasons and that it was going to redistrict somebody out or what have you. Speculation may be what it is. I can tell you right here, right now, myself, I will not support anything that is intentionally trying to disenfranchise, hurt. Now, as you noted, that's not allowable under the law anymore. Prior to, in 2021, I guess it was not a best practice by any means. But I think we need to get the level playing field or understand where we are now and then just figure out what makes sense. To me, I want to understand the purpose and intent where we legally need to be and then where we are currently and then whether there is a valuable, and that's just me speaking. I didn't even necessarily bring this up, but that's where I stand. Mr. Edwards.
Yeah, I am calling for this to be the workshop that we should have had. So, and I'm grateful, and so far, there are some things you've said that I agree with. Mr. Connor should not be involved in this conversation in any way, shape, or form because it is a board conversation and it does involve pure politics. I mean, so I appreciate the line that he had to walk in this conversation, but nonetheless, I'm still going back to I, as a sitting board member, was denied just because someone perceived that no pushback meant that there was a consensus. And I don't agree with that, number one. Number two, if we all, this is Mr. Connor's first 60 days on the job. First 60 days. I have had multiple conversations with him about how incredibly stressful that must be, trying to get to know all of what he has to know, who he has to meet, who he has to speak to, where he has to go, and yet he was involved in a meeting with a consultant, with the lawyer, and the chief of staff to interview this potential when that was not the best use of his time, in my personal opinion. And had we had a workshop to talk about that, I think we might have avoided that if we all agreed per conversation and dialogue that this makes sense to do. I still have yet, I know that you're turning the dial to go to what's the legality. I'm asking the why before the legality.
May I call a vote?
Well,
right now, we have one board member driving a narrative that may not even be pertinent to where we go. And, you know, I'm not in agreement with Mr. Edwards creating narratives that are...
Excuse me, please, that you're warned once. I don't want to have people removed. Please, thank you. May I ask our legal counsel to explain some elements that I personally can't take action on this unless I have clarity on it. And just for note, aside from the workshop discussion, the way it was left was provide us guidance or what the options are, and then to move forward. I agree, this is our workshop, but I want to hear from council just to give us clarity, and therefore our board members can make the decision.
Like I said, the statute changed on July 1st. It used to be one sentence. This particular subsection of the statute now has 3 sentences. Let me walk you through objectively what each of them says. Okay, the first one says, and this is subject to 2 limitations that I really don't think apply here, but one of them has to do with the time frame to make these changes, which kind of puts us in a somewhat of a time period to do it sooner than later. And the other one has to do with redrawing current members' districts so that they would have to move during their term, right? It doesn't sound like those apply here. If you all think they do, I can talk through those points. But so ignoring those for now, what the first sentence says is that a district school board may make any change it deems necessary in the boundaries of any district school board member residence at any meeting of the district school board. So what I think that means is that you have flexibility. Any change is flexible that you deem necessary. So there needs to be some need articulated as a group would be my thought process is what that statute means. The second part I already read you about the intent to favor or disfavor a candidate. I don't know. In one of the districts, there's 2 candidates. There's the incumbent, of course, and then a filed candidate. My advice would be to any redrawing of boundaries that you do to include her. I think that there would be an argument that if we drew a boundary without her in it, that would violate the statute. I'm not 100% sure where Ms. Barker lives. I've heard that she's the Lakeview PTO person. So, and I guess the other thing is she has to be in her district on election day. I think we're having to presume that where she currently resides where she will be on the election day. I don't know what the stability of her residency is. It's not really my business. But that would be something to consider if we are going to move forward. My recommendation would be to have a district not drawn with her outside of it.
Any candidate, any filed candidate.
And I will tell you, I think that she meets the definition of a candidate that's defined in Chapter 97 of the Florida statutes. It's not when she qualifies. My understanding of the fact that she's filed papers, hired a campaign manager, there's some other criteria in that statute. She meets the definition of a candidate.
Can I go back, and pardon me, just from the basic, before we talk about maps, the purpose of the board having any districts, is it based on voters? Is it via population?
Based on population, and it needs to be as equal as practicable. So that is not precision, but it needs to be, basically equal. Not down to the voter, but basically equal. And so a question for the consultant would be, if you move forward is, it was redone 2 years ago, how much change has happened in that time? I don't know the answer to that.
And again, I don't, is there a percent, I don't know, is there a percentage, is there an area, or is there a number that we need to stay in line with? Because as was mentioned, we did do this after the census in 2020. With 2021, we didn't have a consultant. It was done very quickly. I'm not supporting that process was great either because of the way it was brought up, but that's why I truly, when this was brought up, was to have it done publicly, debated, discussed, and understand where we're at. And there's no doubt since then, we've had a lot of people move, but I have no sense of numbers. And so I'm trying to figure out what our legal obligation is.
I believe there's an industry standard. I've had a couple of conversations with the consultant. I couldn't tell you exactly what it is. This is something that requires a lot of expertise, and the consultant has it. I don't have it. I can tell you what I think the law is. And I think the conversation I had with him is that the numbers have not wildly grown since this was done 2 years ago.
Mr. Edwards.
My understanding, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but it's every 10 years we're obligated to do it because it correlates to the census. And that's why it's 10 years is because that's what I believe is the understanding of the movement that happens would be substantial in a 10-year time period versus a 2-year time period. And I'm not a lawyer. But I also want to say that I am not trying to control a narrative. I don't want to antagonize any board members here because we have been doing so well. It's just that all of the interviewing of consultants and all of the conversation was done. I was denied the conversation, in my opinion. That's why I'm just trying to ask the questions. And I don't mean to control a narrative. I'm still, if I were in a workshop today, I'd still be saying, why is it necessary to do this after we've done it per our obligation? We've already had a school board election where 3 fellow school board members were elected in the districts that they're in. Why do we need to spend $39,000 when we just got done having conversation about a reckoning with ESSER dollars? So I'm trying to be fiscally responsible here, but being open-minded that maybe there's something I'm missing.
Thank you. Mrs. Rose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you steering away from politics. There has been no intent to do anything to disenfranchise anyone from the get-go. There has been no decisions made. I do feel like this has been turned into a political platform, and that's taken course in public comment, and that's fine. That's your right. The original conversation occurred that the districts were not done correctly when they were done the last time. They were not done using the GIS tool. They were done using borders and land descriptions, and there are several precincts that are split. There was a lot of difficulty in my understanding and articulation with the supervisor of elections office that it did not fit into the precincts and the pieces. If you look at the school board map, there are several splits in precincts. We've had significant growth in South County. We've had significant growth in East County. There was a recent legislation passed that is requiring some of that to be adjusted. I don't know the specifics of that because I'm not the attorney either, but I'm going to reiterate as concretely as I possibly can that no one on this board has had any intent of doing anything illegally or disenfranchising anyone for any reason. In bringing that narrative to the forefront, you can bring whatever you want, but it is not valid or accurate nor legal.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Mr. Enos.
And I thank the previous board members for bringing that up. I mean, one of the things obviously that sticks out to me is that if the current board member at the time, as well as an attorney, was to do it, that if they're not a consultant, that's not within their specialty. And I know that the consultant that we're looking at has done it at 36 or 39 other school districts. Is that I know for accuracy as well as in there that I do know that at the time that I was running, in reference to the map, contacting the supervisor of elections office, that there is issues that were presented at the time in reference to the data and the materials that were given to them. So, I mean, with that itself, is I'd rather do it the correct way and use a consultant in order to make sure that it's accurate, that it goes along, and the actual precincts lines that do work out, whether it's with and mimics the county commission or not, but it's done actually by a professional that does this for a living, that we could then say, okay, this is one other piece that has been taken care of that is outside of, this is something that a specialist has done, and I think that we all agree that, we try to go to the very best practice and the very best people in order to do it. And that would be ultimately, now with that information that I received, is I would say that, we really need to have a professional to do that as it moves forward. And obviously we already know statutorily, as I'm all about statutes, is that there's no way I would support to disenfranchise any candidate, because we would then automatically open ourselves up for litigation as it relates to that. And that's nothing that I would support based upon that.
Thank you. I just, before we go around, Mrs. Marinelli, did you have any? You're okay. Okay. Mrs. Rose? Mr.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to say that, yes, it was done at no cost last time, but it was also done incorrectly. And it's not it was done incorrectly.
Please, no comments.
The GIS tool was not used. This is not, this is not a political battle of any nature. And it's sad that the time has been taken up tonight for a narrative that does not exist, nor is it legal.
If I may, I will say that since I've been here, I really haven't seen, I've seen the county do things, I've seen it come up, it's always seems rushed, but we haven't had a consultant. I will certainly, and again, this is where I weigh off if this is worth it or not. The fact of the matter that we can only do it during odd years. We did truly experience serious growth since the last time we had this, or not. At least we talk about in Florida having the most significant growth we've seen, and I know we're building a lot of schools, so I believe that to be the case, and that for me is why I'm asking the general counsel as far as what does that look like, where is our obligation. I do think it is a responsibility, one, pursuant to statute, but two, to ensure our boundaries are, even though we're all at large, but making sure we're in line with the statute, because it doesn't matter if you're a single member or at large, that is a requirement that you have a balanced out. And I remember back in 2018, 16, when this was brought up by a former board member, Shirley Brown, that I believe that at that point, I would argue we may have been incorrectly advised, because it was based on, I think that was mentioned, that it was based on voters and not population. That's why I specifically asked that question. I want it done right. I can understand people making it sound or appear that it's political. I personally will not support that if it's political, but as was stated, that's not even allowable under the law, which is good. That's a very good improvement from what it was before. But as there were many comments made today by the public, I wanted to ensure that was corrected, because that is not allowable under the law. Based on recent statute, that any change evaluation would never be afforded to hurt or harm anyone who's already currently filed for office. If I am under, and again, not an attorney, but I want to make that clear to the public. At least that's how I'm gauging it from an evaluation standpoint.
Well, that is the case. It comes down to what the intent of the board as a group is. I don't know what that intent is of all five of you. So that is for you all to decide, but it needs to be based on need. It needs to be what you deem necessary, and you have to avoid doing anything with the intent to favor or disfavor a candidate or an incumbent. Within that, I think there's flexibility for you to do it or not. I will point out that this is a motion to approve the contract. Just a little bit about the contract is it's broken up into phases. It is a little bit less than half of that $39,000 is to have the consultant come in and do one-on-ones with you and do some pre-work ahead of those one-on-ones. If you decide after those one-on-ones as a group to move forward and have a workshop and bring him in and have him draw maps, most of the rest of the contract is due, and then if any changes thereafter, it's a small amount more to make any additional tweaks that you all want to make. So you're not voting on whether you're redistricting tonight, you're voting on whether or not you're going to hire a consultant to come in and have one-on-one meetings with you about this process, so you can make an informed decision based on whether this is necessary and do it with a lawful intent.
Thank you for that clarification. Actually, that is significant. Are there any additional comments?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Edwards.
I did also speak to the supervisor of elections. The work, well, first of all, I would also want to say that there was software that was used, and it was recommended software by the supervisor of elections. I spoke to Jane Goodwin, the chair, who did the work, and I believe that those of us that were on the dais at the time will know that Shirley and I think Charlie Kennedy did try to come up with some things, and that didn't work. And so as Mr. DeLeo and under the direction, I believe, of Mrs. Goodwin, and they did, Diane from our construction department, worked with a software, and that's how those districts were done. That's my understanding. Number two, I did speak to the supervisor of elections, and yes, there are split precincts, but that work is done. So in other words, all of the precincts and all of the division had to happen in order for all of you to be elected. So that work is done, and if we redistrict, then we're asking the supervisor of elections to do that work again. And so, having said all of that, because that's what I'm trying to say, I tried to, every which way of Sunday, to try to be a team player, to figure out why this is a good idea, and so far I still keep coming up with, it doesn't make any sense. And when you bring to me the conversations that we had today about just our legislative agenda and asking for very real dollars that really run this school district, and the fact that we're dealing with ESSER dollars, I just feel that spending $39,000 is irresponsible for a group of school board members who have fiscal responsibility, and that I will not be supporting it for that reason.
Thank you. Additional comments before we call the vote? Mr. Duggan, thank you for highlighting the process, because, again, I don't know that we've ever done, if you look at the county or anything like that, and I did not bring this up, I didn't even coming in here, didn't necessarily know how I wanted to vote. I think it's our obligation to, one, understand what our responsibility is before taking action today. Two, then I would like to see where we are by way of our responsibility from a population standpoint. I have no sense of that since 2021, and making it clear that those fact-finding mission, if you will then determine, and if I'm clear, that will then be a public workshop that we would discuss any potential revision maps? Is that the scope of work that you just outlined?
So obviously that's up to the group and to the superintendent, so I don't want to speak with certainty, but my understanding is the plan would be to have a workshop on October 3rd to discuss it with, by that point, you would have had one-on-ones with the consultant, and he would have the opportunity to draw maps with enough advance time to get them publicly available ahead of a workshop. And then my understanding would be that it would go to a vote on a map on October 17th if you all decided to move forward from the October 3rd workshop. But again, that is up to you and to the whole team here, not up to me.
Okay, and that, okay, so if
But
there,
I will add, that would permit the opportunity to have a workshop with maps in hand. It would permit the opportunity for the public to have two board meetings, the October 3rd board meeting and the October 17th board meeting, to make public comment. So to my eye, that would be a sufficient amount of transparency to have public input on this. And that was the thought process from my perspective, was to allow the public to participate in this.
okay, I will move to a vote on this. So the motion before us, pardon me, I turn my page, as I always do, is to approve the contract for the analysis and generation of redistricting maps. I will call Mr. Edwards.
No.
Mr. Enos.
Yes.
Mrs. Rose.
Yes.
Mrs. Marinelli.
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, and the motion to approve the contract for the analysis and generation of redistricting maps is approved 4-1. That concludes new business. Are there any additional items for discussion?
Madam Chair, just want to
Sorry.
thank Principal Cressley from Venice High School for having us here, and all of the people who have helped support the meeting tonight here at the VPAC. So let's give them a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having this live streamed. I know that there's a lot of work behind that. Thank you for having us at VPAC. This is beautiful, although I can't see very much. And I just want to say one more time, a special shout out. We had a fantastic workshop today on an issue that I believe we have been struggling on from a systems process for longer than I'd like to share. So thank you to Mr. Connor and team for really allowing a lot of work, successful and productive work to be done and accomplished today. Thank you for a great discussion to my board members. Mr. Enos.
Yeah, I also would be remiss. I also want to thank James Slayton from the district, as well as Rod Dragish. I put a lot of time and energy in reference to that Coach Sprague. I got emotional. It was very, very something that was super rewarding, and I just really appreciate the board that indulged me to allow me to do that. Thank you to all of you.
It was the best part of today. So if there are no additional comments, we stand adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.